when you think about what Bruce could give me for my life's journey, it's not just being a fan. It's something which is totally different. It's the idea of making stuff and making stuff that actually matters to somebody. And if it's 5 people, fine. If it's 5 million people, even better. But just make stuff that's relevant. And that's one of the things I could actually say, well, that's something I've learned from the boss. And the idea first was, well, if I want to be like him, I have to play the guitar and sing. And that didn't work. Then I said, well, if I take photographs, I have to take photographs that have the same quality as a Springsteen song, which is pretty high goal to aim for. But which was this idea said, well, if I can't do that, maybe there's some other avenue where that mindset helps you. And that's where I think, well, maybe there's something I could actually say that helped. And the podcasting thing, not with every episode. There are some duds in there, of course. Yeah, but some are really good. And most of the time, it's because the guest triggered something in me, where I said, I would really like you to stay for 8 hours.
In today's episode with Dennis, the second part of our conversation, we talk a little bit about his podcasts. And of course, he answers the Mary question. Let's get off the Springsteen train just for a moment. And let's talk you do a couple of podcasts. So let's talk about those a little bit.
Well, I actually do 2 podcasts. One is, well, the thing is, I'm not promoting the podcast because most Americans can't listen to it because they're all in German. So
right, yes.
We could have subtitles, but that doesn't work on audio. So
no, it does not.
You just have to let me ramble about them for a little bit.
Please.
One is basically the Dennis 18 podcast for creativity, communication, and values, which started as a photography podcast. I started a YouTube channel about photography, and then after a while I said, well, maybe I should do a podcast about that. And that's about 6 years ago now, 5 years maybe. Started pretty early with the podcast trend. And that photography became a little bit too narrow of a subject. So I started widening it and finding ways to still keep the label photography on it, but talking about music and books and all the other things. And then I figured, well, you got to be honest, just move on. You can talk about photography if you want to, but this thing's supposed to have your own name. It's all about the things you think are important. So put your own name on it and make it a broad thematic scope of it. So I can talk about everything there. Lots of authors, lots of music stuff, still lots of photography, and different kinds of creative projects I have. And I also have a second one, which was just a side project, which is called Traumbilder with Dream Pictures, which is a meditation podcast, which has the premise that I read a photograph to you. Basically, I put a photograph in front of me, I look at it, and then I talk about it as long as I find things interesting about the photograph, put some nice music under it, and get you in the right mood with some breathing exercises and everything to calm you down. And then I just talk about the picture, and I guide you through the landscape and talk about the colors and what elements there are and which parts are in focus and which parts are not in focus. And basically it's free association. They're not scripted. So yes. I just, and that's basically, it started as a test of how good my own photography is. Because if you can talk about a picture for about an hour, it's a pretty good picture because it tells you stories. If everything's tack sharp and focused, the colors are wonderful, the composition is great, you look at it and you don't have anything to say about it for more than a minute or so, then it's not a good photograph. That's basically the test of my own back catalog. And that's how it started. as a more or less like an inside joke with myself. I said, well, if I can't talk about this thing for an hour, it's not a good photograph. And the thing actually took off much more than the other one. The other one has about 100 episodes, and this one has 24.
Yeah.
And I can see that brings us back full circle to the whole COVID thing. When COVID started, I had 17 episodes in the can and no listeners.
Right.
There were just a few people listening to it, but basically just friends and family and people who just stumbled over it. And then COVID hit and the thing just took off. And you can see it going up with every wave and going down in between when people think, no, it's getting better. And then next wave comes and it goes up again. And the whole thing actually follows the COVID curve.
Oh, how interesting.
Because people just get scared and anxious and don't know what to do with themselves. And they start looking for stuff that helps to settle them, their soul, or give them comfort, or help them deal with their fears. And this is one of the little things that I can actually do with this podcast, is help people who are mentally stuck or in fear or can't sleep or whatever. And the letters I get, and that's where you can actually measure if you're a successful podcaster or not, is the feedback you get. It's not the numbers. I mean, I'm happy about those numbers, but that's not what it is. Every time someone sits down and writes me a letter or an email and tells me, well, I'm feeling terrible, I've got all this anxiety, I can hardly work, I sit at the office and I try to meditate during my lunch break just to get through the day, and your podcast helps me. That's amazing. That's the biggest gift you can get.
I just want to echo that, Dennis. I get very little feedback from Set Lusting Bruce. I get a few tweets where someone will, reply back to the person who joined me on a Twitter, and say, hey, I really enjoyed the episode. And maybe every couple of months, someone will shoot me an email. But when they do, it just makes my whole day. Just you saying that you'd found the podcast and you'd enjoyed it. There is a joy you get from that, because as I talk about, a podcast is a very lonely thing. Even though you're interviewing someone, and I do this, you do feel like you're speaking to the void, and you're like, is anyone listening? Is anyone care? And I've done similar things that you talked about, that as I've done this further and further, I think the podcast will always be mostly Bruce Springsteen fans, but I love having other podcasters and writers and people that have a loose connection to Bruce at best, but have interesting stories to share. So I always enjoy that part of it. So I totally agree with you. That feedback is just magical.
Especially when you think about this, is there anybody out there? Which takes us back to Bruce.
Yes.
The long before I knew that there was such a thing as podcasts, I always fantasized about being the DJ in a radio station who has the late night shift and probably knows that the only people who are listening are the ones who can't sleep and who are the ones who have to work and the ones who are traveling.
Yes.
And that was the one thing I wanted to do. I wanted to sit in my little room and talk to the microphone, talk to those people. Everybody is asleep. Everybody is happy. But those people have to be awake. And I could be the one to help them through the night. That was one of the fantasies I had way before I started with podcasts. And this is now something I can do in this little niche I found there.
Yes. That's a very romantic imagery, right? Of the idea of keeping someone company that's working the night shift, or that's driving a late night journey, or someone who's can't sleep, and so they've turned on the radio to try to have someone keep them company. I'm thinking of in the wee small hours of the morning, like from Sinatra, or someone that's a very, very romantic imagery, I think.
And that's at 2 or 3 o'clock a.m. That's not the disco people who are on the way home.
Right.
We are talking about the people, the truckers, and the people who have to go work at the at the hospital, work the night
Yeah.
shift, and have to drive home at 5 o'clock in the morning and are tired and everything. Had a terrible
Yes.
night. Those are the people who I had in mind back then.
Yeah.
And I tried my hand at a few songs about that subject when I was still writing songs. I never really got it. The idea was too romantic. The songs looked like cheap Springsteen covers, Springsteen ripoffs. I never really got the right hook into it. But that feeling is something I could actually keep and use somewhere else. And I think that's one of the tricks. When you think about what Bruce could give me for my life's journey, it's not just being a fan. It's something which is totally different. It's the idea of making stuff, and making stuff that actually matters to somebody. And if it's 5 people, fine. If it's 5 million people, even better. But
Yes.
just make stuff that's relevant. And that's one of the things I could actually say, well, that's something I've learned from the boss. And the idea first was, well, if I want to be like him, I have to play the guitar and sing. And that didn't work. Then I said, well, if I take photographs, I have to take photographs that have the same quality as a Springsteen song, which is pretty high goal to aim for. But which was this idea said, well, if I can't do that, maybe there's some other avenue where that mindset helps you. And that's where I think, well, maybe there's something I could actually say that helped. And the podcasting thing, not with every episode. There are some duds in there, of course. Yeah, but some are really good. And most of the time, it's because the guest triggered something in me, where I said, I would really like you to stay for 8 hours. Could we make this as long as possible, please?
Yes.
And there are a few people. I've got a wonderful friend, Judith Dürker, who's she's an actress or actor, as you say nowadays. She's a photographer, she's a writer, and she's an all-around good person. And when COVID hit, the first person I called was her. I said, I want to talk to you. Whenever the world goes dark, I know you've got some light. Could we please talk about this? And then about a year later, we did another call with each other. And then we both said, well, nothing has changed. It's still terrible, but we're still able to have a conversation with optimism. And that's another Springsteen idea, that you can describe the darkest places in the world, but there's always that little bit of light that tells you, well, this is really terrible, but there might be a way out. And if you just believe it, there just might be some kind of, I don't know, angel, friend, mom, whoever comes along to pull you out of that hole. And that's something you don't really have unless you have a conversation platform. And that, at least that helps me a lot, because I can just call people and say, well, I want to talk to you, come on my podcast. And I don't have to stop them at a train station and say, well, could you please talk to me now? You look like someone who knows. It'd be really weird. That's much easier to say, I've got a podcast, but you'd like to join me. I need your wisdom now.
You know, Dennis, that's so well said, that it is, you know, when I reach out to people to have them join me on the podcast, then I'm always flattered and happy when Joe joked about this at the beginning, saying, you know, hey, I went to Jesse and said, hey, I want to be on your podcast. And I'm always happy about that. But I'll reach out to people and they'll go, well, I just don't have an interesting story to share. And I'm going, but you've driven to, I mean, you flew to Australia to attend a Springsteen show, and you live in Europe. That alone is 20 minutes of stories.
Yeah.
You don't have to have someone who, Bruce helped you fight cancer or helped you get through the death of a loved one. And there are just different stories from different people, and I love capturing that. And as you know, and I say this all the time, my goal is to have a conversation that my listener feels like they're eavesdropping, in queue waiting for the show. they're like, oh, I'm getting to hear two mates visit and talk about Bruce, and it's just always a joy. So it sounds like that's your podcast has kind of helped you share, and mine has helped me a lot. That as much as the listeners, I agree with you. If I get 5 people listening or I get 5 million people, yes, 5 million would be great. But even if I can get 5 people listening, I've enjoyed the conversation, and that's enough for me.
Yeah. And I think that's something which is very rare. Most podcasts I found these days, people, the first thing they ask you is, how do I get listeners?
Yes.
How do I get traction? How do I get advertising? All those questions. Yeah, okay. If you're a company and that's what you do, if this is a marketing tool,
Yes.
fine, let me help you. My company can help you. Pay us some money, we'll help you.
Right.
But if somebody comes to me and said, maybe this podcasting thing is something for me, I don't know. I think I should try this. Everybody does it. Maybe it's fun.
Yeah.
Say, okay, let's see, what's your story? What is your story? And then get that out of them, and don't worry about all the technical stuff. I mean, I wrote a book called The Podcast Führerschein, which is basically a driver's license for podcasters.
Mm-hmm.
And the fun thing is, when you have a publisher, they tell you the price tag, the number of pages, and the ISBN number before you actually wrote one word.
Wow.
So you know what they want, and then you write it. The cool thing is that I knew what they wanted, but I knew what I wanted to write. So I did write what I wanted to write, and they let me, which was fun. I was surprised. I thought they might just said, well, yeah, but could you please do more technical stuff? People have to know about all these sampling thingies and mics and cables, and it's all in there. But the thing I put in there, which I think is much more important, are the stories you want to tell. Who are you? What moves you? What do you find interesting? And when you open up a podcast and people tap that listen button, it's like knocking on a door to a party. When the hosts open and said, well, hi, good, you're here. Thank you so much for coming. Come on in. You stay, you're happy. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful night. But if somebody else opens the door, who's just happened to linger in the hallway with a bottle of beer laying against the wall, and just opening the door and say, well, the host is somewhere back there. You go find him yourself. I just probably would just turn around and say, here are the flowers, give them to him, my best regards, and I'm off, because I think they don't want me here.
Right.
And that's one of the tricks. People have to be invited in, and then to come into a room and then discover this room is really nice. I could spend some hours here. And then I sit down and listen to the person next to me. And that's the podcast. That conversation on that couch, when you sit down at a party with a nice person next to you who you may know or may not know, but you find interesting. And they just tell you what they have been through in their lives, what they are thinking about, and you tell them about your stories. And then that clicks, and you look at the watch and say, well, didn't I just sit down 2 hours ago? That's the magic of podcasting. Everything else is radio or marketing. And I put all those things in there, and they let me leave it in the book. So,
yeah, that's well said. That's really, really a very spot on kind of feeling about that, because that's what I try to do, and I think that's what all good podcasters try to do, is just to share stories, and have that, and connections, right? Especially during this pandemic, as Ken Rosen talked about. He said, your podcast is all about connections. We are so self-isolated, and we're all fighting these things. And by having all these different guests on, you hope there's a little connection that are through not only Bruce's music, but then our fandom of that. So yeah, well said, sir. Very nice. All right. Let's talk a little bit more about Bruce. Talk about favorite albums, favorite songs. You mentioned Letter to You. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and Western Stars.
How much time does your family give you? Because those two records are wonderful, and I would like to gush about them forever.
Please do. Please do. We are good.
I was Western Stars. Let's start with that one. That one came so much out of nothing. It appeared in my Instagram feed. I think I didn't know that was coming, and then I heard, what was the first single? There Goes My Miracle. Was that one the first?
Hello Sunshine, I think.
Hello Sunshine, right? That one. And I said, what is this? Where do all the strings come from? And what's all that orchestra stuff going on? Why is this so smooth? And I said, well, Bruce, couldn't we have some edges, please? I like the rough parts. And then I got the whole album, and I said, well, there's nothing is smooth about this album. Everything has edges. Everything is rough. There might be a beautiful sound, and there might be orchestra stuff, and it all looks like it sounds like a movie. It looks like, but there's so much depth in this thing, and so much bare soul and bleeding heart and everything. I said, okay, now I know what this is. So why did you hit us with that single first? I totally got me on the totally wrong foot. That I had no idea what that album was about, and because I'm a Springsteen fan, I buy everything. But this really is special. And when you watch the movie, with the concert and the bits in between where he actually talks about what he's doing and why he's writing the songs the way he is and what the songs are about, and there's so much in there. I say, okay, now I know that depression can actually look beautiful but feel terrible, and which is a weird thing to say, I think. But as someone who has had lots of fights with his own demons, I actually thought, well, this guy really knows what this is why I found him, because he is able to open the lid, take a flashlight and shine into that big dark hole and say, well, I know what's in there. And that's really something. And that's something from someone who you do not know personally, which is weird. And there's one of the things I told my mother a few months ago. I said, when Bruce dies, he won't be a star that dies, or not, I'm not just a fan losing his idol. That will be a family member. That's weird. I mean, I've never known the guy. He's probably very nice. I'm pretty sure he is, but maybe not. Maybe he would be nice to everybody besides to me. Maybe he wouldn't like me. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's possible, but still, he's a very important family member. He's understood so much of what my thinking is and what my feelings are, and how much without knowing me, which is weird. And that's something which really crystallizes very much so in Western Stars. I always thought that maybe Nebraska would be the album, which, but that's too far away. That stuff is, there's too much distance between myself and the characters in the songs. But in Western Stars, even though it's still further away, those are movie stars in the Western United States. How far away from Hamburg or Berlin can you get?
Yes.
But still, something in there actually spoke to me and said, well, finally someone gets me, which is cool. And the Letter to You thing, again, Letter to You, I heard the single first and I thought, okay, this sounds like a Springsteen cover band. I heard this. This is, I don't know, Bruce. Really? Didn't you have time for some more production, more writing, more thinking things over? And then I got the album. I said, okay, now I get it. Okay, this is my favorite band stuck in a room with a bunch of guitars and lots of fun. These guys are really, really rocking it. And after the second business said, well, there's much more about that than there. It's not just rock and roll. There's people getting old, people dying, losing friends, moving on. The thought of maybe I'm the last guy standing. One day they're all gone. Maybe I'm still here. And maybe I'm going first and somebody else will be the last guy standing. Maybe little Steven will be the one doing the Springsteen tribute shows later on. I don't know. And all those ideas that probably wouldn't have been relevant to me when I was 30. But now I'm 45, and which is not old, I know, but sometimes it feels pretty old, especially if you have a kid in a job, which taxes you a lot. But sometimes 45 can feel like 80.
Yes.
So, and I thought, again, how does he do it? Why does he understand me without knowing me? And that's really interesting to know, because Born USA didn't do that. I mean, that thing explained a lot about America to me. That was fun music. That was absolutely the best music of the 80s. But this old stuff, the stuff from the old Bruce, actually gets me. And then I look at the old stuff. I say, well, maybe here. How about Human Touch? being lost in the world, and all you want for is that person next to you in the subways, looking over at you and just nodding his head and say, I don't know you, but you look like a nice person. Go ahead, you go first. That's the little thing you want. It's not the big things, it's just a little bit of human touch. And I thought, even on a record nobody likes, there's that little bit of magic in there, which nobody else can do, at least for me.
No, I totally agree. I've said often that Western Stars feels like a collection of short stories.
Yeah.
And the little miniature movies, I agree. Letter to You will always have a special place in my heart because, you know, at the end of 2020 with all the political stuff, and we will not go back there again, but the idea that you got this gift of a new Bruce Springsteen and E Street Band album, and it was good. And then you got the little film where you watch them working together, was such and right, was it I think they talked about that, like, hey, instead of we go in there and beat the demo, how about you just, instead of doing a demo, you tell us so that we can do that. And I found great joy, Dennis, in watching all these guys in their 60s and 70s with their legal pad and pencils, and as he's playing it, writing, okay, what we do, and then magically they come up with what they're supposed to play. It is just a joy. It is absolutely a joy. Yeah.
I just recently heard an interview. Little Steven's promoting his book, I think, at the moment.
Yeah.
And he was on Chase Jarvis, and he said this story about Danny, who never played anything twice because he couldn't tell you the chords to a song.
Right.
He just listened to what was going on and then found his way somehow into the music and found his place and elevated the whole production in a way that nobody with classical training or deep knowledge of all the intricacy would have ever been able to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need a phantom at the organ to do that magic, and that's probably, I've come back to the word magic, and it's funny that Springsteen actually has an album called Magic.
Yes.
And talking about a magic trick. I think he's probably come up with that analogy as well. That there must be something here which is bigger than myself, and I'm just channeling that. And in a religious person, that will probably be pretty scary. Oh, and in a very and maybe a TV evangelist would probably say, okay, well, the Lord spoke to me and now follow me. And he doesn't do that. He doesn't say, follow me. He just listen to what I have to tell you. And then you go out on your own way. I'll just give you a little bit of a push for your own journey. I'm not here for you to follow me. And that's really interesting to have someone with that deep knowledge about the human psychology and about society, and has such deep knowledge of music and history, and which is so universal across the globe. You go to every country in the world and you put a Springsteen record on, people know what's going on, even if they don't understand the language. But still, he's not the one who's saying, come on, follow me, let's go on, let's join a cult or whatever. Yeah, it's different.
It is. This is awesome. Thank you. This has been so much fun. We've gone over an hour, and I feel like we've just started scratching the surface. I will have to have you on again. We will find an excuse, Dennis, to visit again. I do need to go. Are there, obviously, Western Stars and Letter to You, but are there other songs that you would like to hear live that you haven't had a chance to hear?
Yeah, the entire, I'll probably be the only one at that show, but I would really, really, really would like to see a back-to-back show of all the songs from Human Touch and from Lucky Town. I would really want to spend those 3 hours. I would be alone at the stadium. I know everybody else.
I would be there right with you, so I'd be fine with that.
Go ahead.
Yes. Yes.
We can sing Better Days together.
Yes, exactly.
That's what I really want. That's not going to happen. I know.
No.
And I would also like to go to a little club, maybe a little coffee house, and see Western Stars performed by him with his acoustic guitar. Nobody else.
Yes.
But
that would
otherwise,
be great.
If you're just asking about the classics, probably I don't know, Racing in the Streets. I mean, I've heard that, but
Yeah.
every time it comes up, I'm surprised. This is one of the songs I forget. And when it comes up, it hits me like a sledgehammer because it was so deep in my brain that I said,
Yes.
well, I know all the words, I know all the chords, I know everything about the song, but I keep forgetting it. It's really fun. It's like a
That's
new
neat.
discovery every day. It's a new album every year.
That's lovely. That's great. Any final thoughts you want to share before we get to the Mary question?
Yeah, I would like to talk about, if I may, a little project I did during COVID, which was
Please.
one of the things that really, well, I just self-published a book because it was Tuesday night and I had nothing else to do. It's one of those projects. It's a photo project I did for 100 days. Every day I took a picture of myself, a selfie, like everybody does. And then I took a picture of some object or a surface or whatever I could find out walking about in my neighborhood when you're not locked down, there's not much you can do besides walk around with your phone in your pocket. And I took lots of photos, and then I have this app called Snapseed where you can take one picture and put the other one on top of it, like a sandwich. And in the old days, you would have done like as the double exposure on one piece of film, two pictures at the same spot. And then I moved things about a bit and then changed the colors a bit and then looked at the picture. How do the two levels work with each other? And the idea was to have myself, my picture, my outside appearance, and by putting the extra layer on it, finding something which was hidden inside of me. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But every day for 100 days, I took one of those double pictures. And over 100 days, you learn a lot about the technique, of course, but you also learn a lot about the subject matter you're working with. It was the only photo project I did about myself, because I really don't really want to take lots of pictures of myself. I'm not a big selfie fan, but I said, well, maybe this is the time to really look at yourself in this lockdown situation. And I took all these pictures and then I looked at them and said, wow, this is really interesting. How many layers and how many times they're really dark pictures, really dark. They just appeared. I didn't make them that way. They just showed themselves to me. And some pictures are really whimsical and funny. And some are romantic, and some are soft, and some are hard, some are colorful, and some are gray. And all that happened within these 3 months, these 100 days. And I said, well, they can't just live on my Instagram. This is not where pictures go to die, basically.
Right.
You put them on Instagram and then they disappear. So I had to do something with that. And then I wrote a little essay and put all the pictures in a book and pressed publish on Amazon. That you can do that with Kindle Direct Publishing. And now I got the book back a few days ago, and I actually it's terrible for an audio format. I'm holding it up now.
Okay.
This is a picture of myself and a part of a motorcycle. This, I think, I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, we can. Yes.
This is I think where the brake grips. The I don't know what that part's called. And you see basically like cogs in a machine working inside my head. And there are different pictures where I wear a mask, where my eyes look very dead. And in other pictures, they just look funny. There's some flowers around me and everything. So it's the whole gamut of all the different emotions you feel in that period of time. And now having it in front of you as a piece of paper, you can flip through it and you can actually touch it and look at it. Mm-hmm. That's something which I think is one of the things I would really love people to think about when they have projects which are really meaningful to them, is to show them to people, to publish them in some sort of way. It doesn't have to be the best quality. You don't have to sell it. You can just photocopy it and put it in the subway station and put it on a bench and let somebody else find it and then watch people pick it up. Whatever you want to do, sure. Try to make something physical and not just stay in the digital realm. The smartphone is a wonderful tool, but things actually die on that thing, because sure. one of these days the cloud service won't be there anymore. We have something else, not the phones anymore, but maybe we got chips implanted in our head. Or I don't know how we're going to use technology in 10 years from now. I have no idea. So make something physical. If something's important to you, print it out, put it in a folder in your cupboard, or put it on your wall, or give it to a friend. That's maybe something I would like to leave with people. The mixtape, the old tape from Springsteen.
Yes, exactly.
I wish I still had that. I have lots of Springsteen tapes. That one's lost somewhere.
Yeah.
But those are the things to hold on to. the old concert tickets you stick in between your books in the bookshelf and you find one day. Those are the things that matter, the physical stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Do you have a link where we can pick up the book?
Yeah, I'll send it over to you.
Send it to you. Good.
Yeah, it's a self-publishing thing. It actually is in English, so people will be very happy. They could
Yes,
actually
very
read what I'm
nice.
saying. The whole
Good.
thing starts with a song. I started to write, and then I said, well, I can't write songs anymore because that was the art form that used to save me when I was feeling terrible. Now I can't do it anymore. I don't know. I've lost that magic. Maybe it comes back one day, but right now it's not there. So it starts with a broken song, a half idea, and at the end the whole book ends with the part of Darkness on the Edge of Town where I actually quote Springsteen without asking him first, but I think he will understand.
He'll be okay.
So being on that hill with everything I got, basically.
Absolutely.
That's the part.
So yes, you had sent me a link to the book, and so I really enjoyed it. So I definitely would love to include that in the notes. Dennis, this was so much fun. If you are a fan of Dennis's other podcast and you're listening to this, thank you for listening. I end every episode with the Mary question. Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher who recently retired. He's in the Philadelphia area, and he will spend 2 days of his honors English class going over Thunder Road. They will look at the lyrics. They will talk about the imagery Bruce uses. They will talk about the themes of the song. And then at the end of the 2 days, he asks his class, does Mary get in the car? So Dennis, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Well, first of all, this is the story of a great teacher. This is someone who really knows what teaching is about. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I'm not surprised by the question, of course. Yes. But still, I fought so hard with the right answer, and there probably is no right answer, but I came up with two.
Okay.
The number one is no, she does not get in the car with Bruce. She's waiting for Melissa Etheridge.
All right, there you go. I like that.
Because one of the things when I was about 10 years ago, for some reason I found it important to write a letter to put into my cupboard. If something happens to me, here's how I want you to organize my funeral. I don't know what happened to my brain back then. That's some idea. Not that I was looking forward to that experience, or that I was actually thinking that was going to happen very soon. I just had that idea of wanting to be able to decide myself. And I said, if anybody plays any song I don't want, I'll come back and haunt you. So I thought this is important. So I wrote down the music I wanted them to play. And one of the things was Thunder Road, the unplugged version of Melissa Etheridge together with Bruce. Because first of all, because of the little talk she gives at the beginning, where she explains how she, as a fan, I mean, Melissa Etheridge, she's right up there with them, but she is a fan, and she's a self-proclaimed fan, and she's not ashamed of it. And the way she explained how she sat down with her headphones on and dived into those songs/movies, and she could actually see the movies she was listening to. She was listening to songs, and this is me. That's exactly me. And then she moved over to invite him onto the stage, and then they played together wonderfully, as they, of course, they do, because they're great musicians and really have a great chemistry. But then there's this little thing, the Mary Climb In part, where Bruce steps back and lets her sing it. And I've never heard anyone sing these few words over that E minor chord in such a beautiful fashion like Melissa Etheridge did, not even Bruce. This Mary Climb In, that really raspy voice, which is amazing. And you know she's going to climb in, and the next part will be the song, Maybe You Can Drive, Maybe You Can Sleep While I Drive. Well, she takes a long drive, and her lover sits next to her, puts her head on her shoulder, and just lets her drive. And that's Mary. She gets into that car, not in Bruce's car. And the other answer.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I've talked about this, so you may have heard this, but Melissa tells the story during the lockdown that when she asked Bruce to join, when she told the producers she wanted Bruce Springsteen, she didn't think he would say yes, and he did. And she told him it's really, really important for her to be able to sing that line, because
Okay.
for the
Didn't know that.
longest time, because she was in the closet, she never pictured that she, as a female protagonist, would say that line about another female. And
Yeah.
so she told Bruce it was really important for her to sing that line. And so Bruce is like, yeah. But if you watch the clip, every time they practice, she doesn't sing the line. She
Okay.
messes up. So if you go back when we get off the call, because she told the story, if you watch him, when she sings it, he laughs because he was ready for her not to sing it. And she does. And he kind of laughs a little bit because she nailed it.
Yeah.
So I think
But it's not
that's,
an easy line to sing.
it is not an easy line to
It's
sing.
not an easy line to sing. Yeah.
And so if you, and you can hear, it was on Facebook Live, she told the story, but if you watch the clip, he kind of giggles because he's like, okay, is she going to do it? Is she going to do it? And she did. So I love that answer. All right. What's your second answer, Dennis?
Well, the second answer is that she does get in, and
Okay.
she gets out, and she gets back in, and she gets out all her life long, because that's how real relationships work. You don't
Yes.
just hop into a car and drive into the sunset. That may work for a night, or maybe a week, or for a holiday, or maybe for a year or two.
Right.
But if you're there for the whole long journey of life, there's no way you're just gonna stay in the car. You're gonna
Yes.
get out, you're gonna slam the door, you're gonna walk away, you're gonna scream your head off, and you come back and you sit back down and you drive some more. And one of the things, I think one of the other guests also said that the racing in the street part, she sits
Yes.
on the porch of her daddy's house, and old wrinkles around her eyes, and she is not happy. She's all her life's burdens are in her face, and you can actually feel how heavy life's burdens are. But then they still get in the car, and they still go together, and they take the next step, and then in the end, um, you know, the time is right to go racing in the street, and that there is, again, even though everything is dark, the partner's still there, and nothing is roses and everything all the time, but still you found that person who always gets back in the car. And I think that's the trick. The trick is not to find a Hollywood movie partner who just falls in love with you and is happy with you every day. That's not how our relationships work. And I think that's one of the things which is amazing, that someone at that age actually had that insight.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that um, my wife and I have been married since 84. So we've been, over
Congratulations.
35 years. And
Wow.
it is, we say this a lot, that it's never 50-50. Sometimes it's 90-10. Other times it's 10-90. Just your hope is that it evens out enough that you feel as a partner, you've been supported as much as you've supported. Because depending on the time, your partner is carrying more of the heavy load than you are, and then other times you're there to carry them, that
Yeah.
should I fall behind, right? This
Yeah.
whole thing. So
We,
absolutely.
we played that song at a wedding.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
just beautiful. Dennis, this is great. If someone wants to reach you, how can they? What's on social media? What's the best way to visit with you?
I've got my web page. It's got a contact form where you can just type everything in, and then it lands right in my email.
Okay.
It's dennis18.de for Germany, DE. And the other way is just Dennis18 on all the platforms. Please ignore Twitter, because I tend to do that myself. And Facebook is really something I go to every now and then because I think I have to. But
Okay.
if you really want to find me, go to Instagram. It's probably if you want to stay on the socials, or just
Okay.
just find my webpage.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Dennis, thank you. This was a blast. I want to have you on again. We'll find another excuse. I feel like there are, as you talked about, where there's that person across the aisle that you could sit there and you're like 3 hours later, you're like, oh, I'm sorry, I've ignored everyone else in the party and we've just had a blast. So thank you. This was great.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for having me. I really, really would like to come back, and I would invite you to my podcast. But everybody would be really, really because we would have to talk in English, and that would
They would all be confused.
yes.
Yes. No. Okay.
I've tried that in my YouTube channel, and people said, "Well, thank you very much, but could we please go back to German?" I don't
Yes.
know. But
Absolutely.
whenever you have time, I'm more than up to it. I think I found a friend across the ocean. So thank you
I
very
think
much
so
for
too.
inviting me.
Thank you. All right, listeners, you go stay safe, get vaccinated. Remember to social distance. Let's all be good to each other because that's how we're going to get through this. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Wear your effing masks.
Yes. Set Lusting Bruce has a Patreon page where you can offer to donate anything from $1 a month up to whatever amount you want. Thanks to the wonderful people who support the podcast through Patreon, I'm able to cover the cost of the Zoom recordings and the hosting of the podcast, putting it out, things like that. So thank you to Holly Mack, Steve Rogers, Dale Hosack, Terry Smith, Anna Lynn, Chris Bloom, Mary Thomas, Alex Samolta, Andrew Goddard, Betsy Hodges, Levi Petrie, Stephen Malio. Each of you are my Springsteen siblings. You are my angels, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you for all your support and love.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Lusting Bruce. The theme for Set Lusting Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.